The room was silent, but it wasn't the kind of silence that calms the nerves. It was heavy, unnatural. Overhead, a single bulb flickered, barely clinging to life. A figure sat in the far corner, knees pulled tightly to his chest. His fingernails were gone, ripped out against the steel walls. His lips had been chewed bloody, his eyes opened so wide they didn't blink. Behind the thick observation glass, the researchers stared in disbelief. They had expected insomnia, maybe even madness. But not this. Not a man who looked as if sleep had been replaced with something far worse. This was only day 15, and what started as a Soviet military experiment had spiraled into something much darker. What happens when you take sleep away, not for one night or two, but for weeks on end? What happens to the human mind when it is no longer allowed to dream? Section 1. The Legend of the Russian Sleep Experiment. The story began online, anonymously. It first surfaced in a Creepypasta forum in 2010. The perfect birthplace for a story so disturbing it felt like it could be true. The post was titled Russian Sleep Experiment and claimed to reveal a declassified Soviet-era experiment from the late 1940s. According to the tale, Soviet researchers sealed 5 prisoners inside a military testing chamber. They were told they'd be freed if they participated in a sleep deprivation study that would last 30 days. Instead of keeping them awake manually, the researchers filled the chamber with an experimental gas. This gas was supposed to prevent sleep entirely, keeping the brain alert but the body sedated. For the first 3 days, the men acted normally. They talked to each other. Their conversations were recorded, and the researchers took notes. By day 5, the subjects had become irritable and paranoid. By day 9, things turned far more disturbing. One subject began screaming non-stop. He screamed so hard and for so long that his vocal cords tore. The others showed no reaction. Then the silence began. When the researchers finally peeked inside the chamber, they were met with a scene of unimaginable horror. One subject was dead. Another had ripped open his own abdomen. The others had mutilated themselves, tearing flesh from bone without even flinching. When asked why they had harmed themselves, one man whispered, "I must remain awake." Section 2. Fact or fiction? No official documents exist to confirm this experiment ever happened. Historians and researchers widely agree that the Russian sleep experiment is a modern myth, a horror story created for the internet. And yet, it feels strangely plausible. Why? Because during the Cold War, both the Soviet Union and the United States conducted experiments that were arguably just as cruel, just as unethical, and just as bizarre. Mind control programs, sleep studies, drug experiments, these weren't fiction. They were funded, documented, and in many cases exposed. The CIA's infamous MK Ultra program involved dosing civilians with LSD without their knowledge. In Canada, patients were subjected to weeks of drug-induced sleep, combined with electroshock therapy, all in the name of psychological research. And in the Soviet Union, secrecy was standard practice. The KGB's archives contain countless experiments, many of which have never been made public. So even though the story of the Russian sleep experiment may be fabricated, the context in which it's told is disturbingly real. Section 3. What does sleep deprivation really do to us? To understand the psychological horror of the Russian sleep experiment, we need to understand what actually happens when we stop sleeping. Sleep is not just rest. It is a biological necessity, like breathing or eating. During deep sleep, our brains flush out toxins, consolidate memories, and regulate emotions. Without it, the brain begins to malfunction. After just 24 hours, the effects are mild, slower reaction time, foggy thinking, mood changes. After 48 hours, the mind starts slipping. You may begin to hallucinate. Your thoughts fragment. Emotional control fades. By 72 hours, many people begin to lose touch with reality. Visual and auditory hallucinations become more frequent. The brain tries to force microsleeps brief, seconds-long lapses in consciousness that you cannot control. In extreme cases, prolonged sleep deprivation has led to psychosis, paranoia, and physical collapse. One of the most famous real-life experiments involved Randy Gardner, a high school student in California who stayed awake for 11 days in 1964. By day 6, he was incoherent. He experienced delusions, memory loss, and even believed he was a famous football player at one point. But he lived, and he recovered. Unlike the fictional test subjects in the Russian story. Section 4. The dark appeal of scientific horror. There's something uniquely terrifying about scientific horror. It doesn't rely on ghosts or demons. The villain isn't supernatural, it's human ambition. The Russian sleep experiment is so effective as a story because it plays on our deepest fears. The loss of control, the distortion of the mind, the betrayal by those meant to protect or help. It takes place in a sterile lab, surrounded by scientists who feel nothing, who watch suffering with detached curiosity. The most horrifying part of the story isn't the blood or the violence. It's the moment when the test subjects beg not for release but for more gas. They don't want to sleep, they want to stay awake. As if something inside them has changed so completely, they no longer belong to the human world. It's the perfect metaphor for what can happen when humanity abandons morality in the pursuit of power. Section 5. Other experiments from history. And history, as it turns out, is filled with real examples of inhumane experiments. Japan's Unit 731 during World War II carried out medical atrocities so horrific that even many historians avoid the details. Prisoners were vivisected without anesthesia. Exposure to freezing temperatures was used to study frostbite. And yes, sleep deprivation was included in the long list of tortures. In North Korea, defectors have reported secret medical labs used for biological testing on political prisoners. In Nazi Germany, the concentration camps served as grounds for forced experiments on twins, pregnant women, and children. In these cases, the suffering was real, the data was collected, and the scars remain today. Compared to this, the Russian sleep experiment begins to feel like a parable, an allegory about the fine line between science and cruelty. Section 6. Could a sleepless human exist? Now let's ask the impossible. Could a human actually survive without sleep, long-term? The short answer is no. The brain simply cannot function without it. Even if a drug could suppress the need for sleep, it would only delay the damage, not prevent it. There are rare cases of people with a genetic condition called fatal familial insomnia. It destroys the brain's ability to sleep and eventually leads to dementia, then death. These patients begin hallucinating, then lose motor control, and finally slip into a waking coma. The condition has no cure. This is not science fiction, it is reality. The body shuts down, the mind fractures. Sleep is not optional, which brings us back to the story. If sleep were removed entirely, not just suppressed for a few nights, the result would not be enhanced humans. It would be broken minds in broken bodies. Section 7. The story's cultural impact. Despite being fiction, the Russian sleep experiment has taken on a life of its own. There are podcasts, horror short films, graphic novels, even supposed leaked footage on YouTube. Millions of views, endless fan theories, a modern urban legend, living and evolving in the digital age. Why? Because people love to ask, what if? What if we went too far? What if our darkest impulses were given a blank check? What if the price of progress was paid in blood? It feels real because it speaks to something we know has happened in history. And it continues to spread because people want to believe the government hides horrors just out of view. So, no, the Russian sleep experiment never happened. There are no declassified documents, no hidden labs, no survivors. But the reason the story endures has less to do with whether it's real and more to do with what it says about us. We are drawn to stories of control, suffering, and the pursuit of perfection. And the truth is, some of those stories have happened. We just gave them different names. It's not about sleep. It's about the price we're willing to pay to push the limits of what it means to be human. Thank you for watching. If you found this video thought-provoking, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into dark history, science, and the mysteries that keep us awake at night. And don't forget to check out our other video. Thank you for watching and see you on the next one.